What's next for the Pac-12 after losing Colorado to the Big 12? Now, they issued a statement last night, and they pretty much said that, they're not going anywhere. They're going to look at all possible options. Oregon State just came out recently and said that they still believe in the Pac-12. They're not going anywhere. But it's like, what's next for Oregon and Washington, though? Because we already know how the Big 12 has this infatuation with the four corner schools: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. And according to some rumors out there, Arizona is probably the next thing cooking out of the Pac-12, headed to the Big 12 due to how good they are in basketball. And when we're looking at Oregon and Washington, after UCLA and USC leads for the Big 10 and Colorado leads for the Big 12, what value does this conference really have for schools like them? And the Pac-12 right now is struggling to get a new media rights deal. Nobody even wants to pay all the money it costs to air these Pac-12 games compared to the kind of deals that schools got in the Big 10 and the SEC and the Big 12. And when you are ESPN and the Pac-12 commissioner is coming at you trying to negotiate a deal, you're like, sir, who do you have in this conference who people really want to watch? Let's be honest. Outside of Oregon and Washington, there's nobody else who you want to watch in the Pac-12. Colorado with Deion Sanders is the Big 12 now. So you don't have that anymore. So what's the appeal? And if you take Oregon and Washington out the equation, this conference is nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing keeping the Pac-12 alive right now, in my opinion, is the fact that they still do have Oregon and Washington. But I think they could be leaving for the Big 10. I don't get why the Big 10 wouldn't give them membership, and it strengthens their conference. Yeah, you'll have to make it work with the time zones and whatnot. You'll be adding some more Pac-12 schools, but why not? If the Big 12 is going to continue to expand and they get all four of those corner schools like they want, you're going to have to expand. And the SEC, they might start expanding again. So it's kind of like when one conference starts expanding and the other stops, somebody else starts up again. The Pac-12, for them to stay around, I think they got to keep Oregon and Washington. Now, getting Boise and getting a San Diego State, I don't think that really helps you any much. It helps you keep more depth around your conference. It helps you keep more teams in this conference, but it doesn't really make you a more legitimate conference than what you were prior to adding them. Those schools are not going to really bring anything crazy to your conference, and nobody's going to want to watch Boise and San Diego State on national television. No disrespect to those fan bases, but nobody really is going to be infatuated with watching San Diego State and Boise late night. And I think there's a reason why they got this Pac-12 after dark. You mean to tell me that the only way we can watch Washington and Oregon State play is by staying up to 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. in the morning to watch the games finish? Come on, man. And when I'm looking at the Big 10, the Big 10 right now, outside of UCLA and USC, they haven't made any other moves. But I definitely think that if Washington and Oregon still are open to leaving the Pac-12, if you're the Big 10, why wouldn't you add them? Two really good media markets, two really good programs, not just in college football, but in college basketball as well. They got pretty solid basketball programs. I don't think it wouldn't make sense for the Big 10 to add Washington and Oregon to their conference. And Oregon State, if you're Oregon, why not bring your rival along? Isn't that how it went with USC on their move to the Big 10? It was like, you know what? We're going to move to the Big 10, but we're going to bring our rival with us. And why wouldn't you want to bring that rivalry to the Big 10 if you're their commissioner? Oregon State and Oregon is a really underrated rivalry that a lot of people sleep on, because the Pac-12 is a conference that not a lot of people watch or pay a lot of attention to. So putting those schools in the Big 10 will put a major national media spotlight on them. And for the four corner schools, Colorado's in the Big 12 now, but Arizona State, Utah, are they going to stay in the Pac-12? Utah, I think they will fit in very perfectly in the Big 12. I would love to see them in the Big 12. I also wouldn't have a problem seeing Utah in the Big 10. When you watch Utah play, don't they kind of remind you of a Big 10 football team? Tough, physical, love to run the football down your throat, tough quarterback play, tough defense. I think they could be a very good fit in the Big 10. But if I had to tell you guys who I believe is most likely going to leave next, I think it's going to be Arizona or one of those four corner schools. I think that the Oregons and the Washingtons of the world are kind of waiting to make a big move. Now, when those two schools leave, or if they leave, I think this conference is officially done. I really think those are the only two schools keeping this conference around. Then, if you're a Pac-12 truther, there's no way you can convince anybody that Boise and San Diego State and SMU are going to be enough to have this conference still viewed as a P5 conference. I'm sorry, but there's not a lot of depth in the Pac-12. There already wasn't a lot of depth in the Pac-12 anyway, with Stanford being down. Stanford, USC used to always be on ESPN, and never after 10 p.m. at night. You used to always see some of the best Pac-12 teams playing at pretty reasonable time slots. No later than 8 on Fox or, 6 on ABC. The Pac-12, I think, is pretty much all but done. At least as a legitimate Power 5 conference. You keep Oregon State around and you lose Washington and Oregon, you're pretty much a better version of the Mountain West. You might as well go ahead and take those teams also. With the Pac-12, it's like you can add all the schools you want to expand, but it doesn't matter if they're not big brands. You lose USC, you got to bring in a brand that's just as big or two schools that kind of can make up for it. Cincinnati lost Texas and Oklahoma. They brought in Cincinnati, BYU, Colorado, Houston, and UCF. What has the Pac-12 done? Same thing with the ACC. The Pac-12 hasn't really been able to be on the aggressive. And you had Deion Sanders there. And you still couldn't get a media rights deal negotiated? I mean, we don't know who's going to end up having the rights to show Pac-12 games. A couple months ago, I thought it was going to be Amazon. Now we don't know who the hell it's going to be. I think the Pac-12 is just a dying conference. I think it's done. You ask me who's leaving next? Oregon, Washington, Big 10. Come on, Big 10, what are you waiting for? I would love to see Oregon and Ohio State every single year. Washington versus Michigan would be a really interesting matchup. Washington versus Maryland. There are a lot of potential great matchups that we could witness in the Big 10 this year or next season if Oregon and Washington were to join. But I think that the Pac-12 is kind of done, man. I don't know why people still think there's a little bit of hope for the Pac-12 to survive. Like, you lost USC and UCLA, fam. And you just lost Colorado. This is the beginning to the end. Pac-12 know it. Oregon State issuing a statement because who's interested in Oregon State? Their football program has been down for most of the past decade, and their basketball team doesn't really do anything neither. Nobody's going to be chomping at the bit to watch an Oregon State game. No offense to Oregon State, but it's just that you're not a national brand. You're not the kind of brand that, galvanizes ratings, at least yet. But let me know who you guys think is going to be the next team to leave the Pac-12 and what's next for the Pac-12 conference.